All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Ask Questions with Brandon Chisholm. And today we have a very interesting topic to talk about, and it's a topic that I think everybody should start to talk about. I think it's something that should be a trending topic because of the topic is based in a theme that's been really popularized for the past 4 or 5 years or so, maybe. And that theme is generational wealth. Everybody wants to build generational wealth now, especially, being that a lot of minorities are now privy to information that can help, those social groups build up generational wealth. You have shows like that are from EYL, Market Mondays, and their ecosystem that really, brings entertainment and education, all, together to, really impact the culture, in a huge way, to bring that information to the people, information about how to build up businesses, how to generate income from different assets, all these different vehicles that, can help people build up generational wealth. And like I said, the topic is based in that theme. So, but this particular subject, I don't think I've heard too many people talk about. And I think people, if you're on the path of building generational wealth, you definitely need to think about these things because, when it comes to generational wealth, when it comes to generational wealth, you're basically storing up assets for your children and their children. And you have to really structure your family in a way to where they know the importance of what you're doing by building generational wealth, as far as why you're doing it. And then you want to have some guidelines or some rules, a framework around, maintaining what the family needs to do, what all the children need to do, who they need to, I'll get into all of it, but what the family needs to do overall as well to maintain that wealth for the coming generations. So, and that's the reason why pretty much I got on my fatigue, got my black on, and I thought it would be fun to dress up, well, not dress up, but to wear black and fatigues to talk about this, because what I'm going to do is I am going to sort of expose, quote unquote, the dark side to generational wealth. And there is a dark side to it. So I know people are wondering, okay, well, are you wealthy? How do you know there's a dark side to generational wealth? I'm not wealthy per se as an individual. I am working on my individual wealth. However, my family, growing up so I'm a 78, born in 1978. My birthday would be on the 19th of this month. So I'm a Sagittarius. Shout out to the Sags. And growing up growing up in the 80s and the 90s, and just thinking about my family and the generation that they grew up in, my family owned a convenience store, and they were pretty affluent for that period of time, and so a lot of the conversations when they were based around family resources, a lot of these conversations were some very difficult conversations to have, in terms of lineage, who to marry, who not to marry, what you want. Like, the family had a input into these things. My father made made his presence known and his views known amongst the kids on the dynamics of, how we should go about living our lives. And it wasn't from a control perspective. It was more so, hey, you know, um, here is, here's where the family is. Here's where the family wants to end up or continue going. Here are the things. Here's the foundation that's in place that will work to keep the family headed in this direction. So I have some privy or a little background in this topic because I've had these conversations with my father, coming from, like I said, a family that owned their own business and was a successful family in the in the convenience store business. So, and got relatives and things like that also who also own convenience stores and whatnot. So, yes. So the right question for this topic or today is, are you mentally prepared for the dark side to generational wealth? And trust me, there is a dark side. And when I say dark side, I'm not talking about what they did in, medieval, I'm not talking about incest and all that type of stuff. Nothing getting into that dark. But a lot of topics around who to marry, who not to marry, the kids in the family, who's going to, get what in the family, things like that. Those are some, in my mind, dark conversations, or some conversations that a lot of people, I don't think, are having, because when you have these conversations about lineage and things like that, people move a certain way. And in this day and age, I just don't see a lot of people moving in this fashion that was, sort of expressed and, taught to me. So let's get into it. All right. So first of all, let's identify, I think we've already identified what generational wealth is. It simply, refers to having a group, a bunch of financial assets that are passed down from one generation to the next. All right. You got that. Now, people would ask, well, what is a generation? So I don't know if many people know this, but one generation from a year, how many years is one generation? One generation spans between the years of 20 to 30 years. And the reason there's a 20 to 30 year gap in there is because men and women tend to live different lengths of life. We all know that women tend to live longer than men. So for the sake of the conversation, we're going to take the average. So in between 20 and 30, which is 25, we're going to take the number 25 and stick with that. So how long is one generation? One generation is typically 25 years. So if you've lived 4 generations, then guess what? You've lived 100 years, essentially. Now, with that being said, for each generation, let's just say 25 years, well, you have to store up enough assets for your child to live at least 25 years with, 20, basically be taken care of for 25 years. So if you want to have, generational wealth, then guess what? If they live 3 generations, then you have to have enough money and assets to help sustain their life for 75 years past your life. So if you're, take for instance my age, I'm 43. I will soon be 44 on the 19th of December. So for me, I'm 40 something years old, and guess what? I have to have enough assets and whatnot to sustain my life for the 44 years And if I live on to be, 80 or 100, and I have to have enough finances and resources to sustain the next 40 something years of my life. So, the numbers add up pretty quickly. And that's what you want to first off, let's get that out the way. Let's first off acknowledge that, hey, look, generational wealth is building up money for your kids for the next, 80 years of your child on top of your life, because you still have to live too. So that's one part of it, right? So now that we understand what a generation is, next, okay, so we've covered the wealth aspect of it. We've covered the length of a generational aspect of it. And for this video, I'm really going to take my time and really dive into some notes that I've written down to help me, process and think through and really just lay out what I'm really want people to get, which is, hey, look, a lot of these conversations that we're going to have now, a lot of these topics that I'm going to talk about, you all want to have with your family, and you all want to think about these things. So, and I'm not really here to, talk about how you get, generational wealth. That's, other videos. You can look at other videos for that. I want to talk about the psychological or the mental aspect of it in terms of, how you maintain generational wealth. Okay. Because this is something that I think about. Okay. The resources and whatnot that my family, has built up. How do I help, continue? How do I help push the envelope down the road, or kick the can down the road, in a sense, to where, okay, the wealth, the resources that have been built up by the family, I can add on to those resources and continue the family legacy in that fashion. In terms of building, having that generational wealth. Because it starts with somebody. So let's see here. So we've already kind of covered what the question is. Are you mentally prepared for the dark side of generational wealth? So let me go into what sparked this idea. So my sister-in-law and my brother have been living with me, or staying with me, for a little bit of time while their house is being renovated. So she was watching the Meghan and Harry story. Everybody knows Harry, the Prince of England. He married, Meghan, who is, westernized, and she's an African American woman. Okay. So I'm watching that, and, it got me to thinking about some conversations that I had with my dad. And what I was kind of hearing from the Meghan and, story, how she, depressed she was at different times, not depressed, but how stressed out she was at different times. I think she had a miscarriage at one point in time, and they think the stress of everything that was kind of going on with the tabloids, with her, were really affecting her mental and physical, state of being. So what I started to think about was how the Queen of England and, the family in whole kind of thinks. Because I think there were stories out there where the Queen wasn't too happy about it, for whatnot, and let's just be honest. I say race, but it's more like ethnicity. Ethnicity played in a big. There were some undertones about ethnicity, her ethnicity versus, the ethnicity of the family. And what I started to think about, I thought about those conversations that my dad told me about, in terms of the importance of, having children, within the same ethnicity. and it made me think about all of the stuff that I know she's probably going through in terms of Megan with the family, because when you think about generational wealth, it's not only passing down assets to your kids, but their children. Are their children of the same ethnicity? And many wealthy families want their children to be of the same ethnicity, because it adds to, in their minds, the purity of their ethnicity. Plus, it's just, easier for them to, it's easier for somebody to give you an idea and you take that idea or belief system as your own. It's easier for somebody to do that if we both look the same. So if I look different from you, it's like, okay, that can cause maybe a conflict there. Like, well, I'm not really like you, so I don't really necessarily believe I have to do things like you did them. And some things, I do agree that some belief systems need to be, put to rest or tweaked a bit to, to really just continue down, the path, or they need to be updated. Basically, it's like updating a computer system. So I do believe that there is an element of that that's factored into that. However, from a core foundation perspective, I believe that there's some things that just you shouldn't deviate from. Okay. And I can understand, I see the dynamics playing out in terms of the rift that it's caused between Harry and the family, him marrying somebody who wasn't of their nationality or like I said, their ethnicity. Race, I don't really look at the word race in that term, because, we're all of the human race, but we're different ethnicities. I am of, African ethnic origin who lives in America, so that makes me, who was born and raised in America, so that makes me an African American person, an African American citizen. So everybody, Chinese American and things like that, but their ethnicity is Chinese, British, Irish, all these different ethnicities. And a lot of times there are principles that come with these ethnicities that a lot of these people tend to stick to. However, when it comes to generational wealth, I believe there's a common theme across all ethnicities in terms of, because once you get to a certain status financially, money is money. Okay, it's no longer a race thing in terms of, hey, I'm black, you're white. Two billionaires, one white, one being black. They mostly focus on, hey, your money is green, my money is green. How can we help each other? I don't have a problem with your color because, hey, you pretty much were on the same level. So that's why I don't really use the word race in this particular fashion. It's more so ethnicity. So, like I said, when I heard that, it got me to thinking about conversations that I had with my father. And like I said, there were some hard conversations to have about, me marrying black, making sure I marry a black woman and have black kids, and really thinking about, okay, helping out the community and, uplifting African Americans in that fashion from a financial perspective and things like that. So it made me think about those conversations that I had with my dad. And then I got to thinking about, okay, establishing and maintaining generational wealth. What sort of mindset do you have to have? And wealth is more of a community-based thing. When you think about some of the wealthiest families in the world, okay, I think I have a list. Some of the wealthiest families in the world, most of that wealth they make sure they keep in the family. And family and ethnicity is tied to family. It's tied to their family. So I'm gonna go over the top 20, maybe the top 10. I'm going over the top 10 wealthiest people in the world. So you have the Waltons, and we're going to go to what's the common theme, what's the common ethnicity between those. So you have the Waltons, then you have the Mars, okay. Then you have the Coach, that's number 4. Outside, that's number 5. Then you have the Hermes, Ambani, Werthermere, Cargill, that's number 8. Thompson family, number 9. Then the Hoffman family, number 10. So when I think about all these different families, the common theme is when you look at the dynamics or the structure of their family and their kids and who the kids marry, the businesses that the kids have, things like that, more necessarily, the ethnicity of their kids and things like that, they're all in the same ethnicity. So this idea that having a mixed ethnicity of people, okay, and having generational wealth, when you look at the top 10 people who have that sort of wealth that can, sustain hundreds of generations down the road, the type of money that they have, when you think about that, you have to ask yourself, why is it that they have not allowed, and a lot of these families haven't allowed their kids, to marry outside of their ethnic origin, okay? Because the environments that they put their kids in, they put them in environments where they just don't have access to outside ethnicities. Or if they do, it's not from the standpoint of, let's just say that they do have these access to these individuals, or to, access to Chinese, white people, or not white people, Chinese, Irish, African American, African, like they have access to these people, or they're around these people. However, the conversations that are had behind closed doors with a lot of the, patriarchs and matriarchs of the family are simply, hey, look, if you're going to marry, you need to marry within the race, within the ethnic. They say race, I'm going to say ethnicity. You need to marry within the same ethnicity. And the reason for that is every ethnicity has, just from the reason of keeping things pure in their minds. So when I look at that, when I look at those top 10 families, I think about what type of ideal or principle that they have to have. And a lot of these people, a lot of these families, these wealthy families, they have a collectivism idea versus individualistic way of thinking. So when you have an individualistic way of thinking, okay, that way of thinking is pretty much rooted in, hey, it's what I want to do. It's, I am an individual, and I want to, do this, or I want to do that, and outside of what the family wants. However, when you look at a collectivism idea, when you look at collectivism essentially is you're prioritizing the good of society over the welfare of the individual. So having a collectivism mindset, a family-oriented mindset, is more so, hey, we have to do what's for the good of the family as a whole unit. I know you have your individual things that you want to do, okay? How can we align your individual things that you want to do in with the family's idea of what we need the family to move forward in? And a lot of times, behind closed doors, a lot of these families are having these conversations like, hey, look, you can't marry somebody of this race or ethnicity. You can't, you know, if you do, then you know what? You're on your own. We'll maybe help you out a little bit, but in terms of, continuing the family legacy on, we're not depending upon you for that. And I think that's one conversation that I don't really think a lot of people are having in terms of, hey, look, are you if you're in this camp of building generational wealth, are you talking to your children and telling them, hey, look, yeah, I pretty much want you to marry, inside the race, inside the ethnicity. And if you don't do that, then you know what? Hey, I love you, but I'm not going to allocate, you know, for some families they're probably like, I'm not going to allocate anything. But I think most of them are like, well, I'm not going to allocate a good amount of resources towards helping, sustain your life because, hey, look, this is what the family needs. The family doesn't need people in this ethnicity because they think differently than us. Like, there's just a difference there. And I think that, you know, um, that's a conversation that definitely needs to be had. Are you having conversations with your kids around how they are going to maintain, that wealth? Okay. Do they have this? Are you teaching them the same, principles? Do you have like family principles in terms of, what type of businesses you want them to be involved with? What type of, educational systems are they learning? So, all these things have to be accounted for. And I know for a fact, a lot of those, I know, I won't say no for a fact, but I do believe that a lot of people, you know, want it to be where, hey, you should just be able to marry this day and age. You should be able to get with and marry anybody that you want to. Well, you know, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, you know. Um, but that's, where that kind of conversation, kind of breaks down. Um, and let's see here. The wealth lasts many generations. One reason. Okay. So another thing is, okay, well, how do you help equip your, kids to really push this thing forward and maintain, generational wealth? So, because when you think about it, okay, well, let's just evaluate. Let's just say people who have generational wealth and they don't maintain it over the course of the next few generations. Well, how were they not able to maintain it? And a lot of times, from what I've, kind of looked up and researched, you know, um, a lot of these families, you know, didn't maintain their generational wealth because the family wealth was diluted amongst the kids. The kids maybe had their own individual ideas about what they wanted to do in life. They didn't want to get into this field or that field, or they had their own individual ideas about who they wanted to marry, who they wanted to have children with, and things like that. So all these different ideals started to come about, and that's one way generational wealth gets diluted. And I know, so just think about it. If you're a parent and you're building generational wealth for your kids and their kids, and they aren't pretty much, maybe they don't do certain careers that can help move the needle down the road, or if they marry somebody that maybe just doesn't have the same mindset in terms of thinking about work, doing the work to create and maintain generational wealth, well, the wealth that you're building up now, that wealth is going to get diluted. Okay, it just is. So now you have to ask yourself, okay, A, what are you doing it for? You know, do you really need to be building generational wealth? Okay, um, do your kids understand what's involved, like the work that's involved, the duty, the dedication that's involved with having generational wealth? You know, that's a big burden, I guess, to shoulder. Continuing the assets down the road, down the lineage for their children now, and wanting to instill different work ethics and principles in their kids for them to continue building on top of that wealth as well. So, you know, that's a conversation that I don't think a lot of people would like having, because nobody wants their kids to feel like they're obligated to do something. However, with much, when much is given, you know, much is required of you. So if, like they say, more money, more problems, you know, the problems I think are the same. It's just the intensity of these problems. You know, are people equipped to mentally go through the stress of deciding, okay, well, what if my son or daughter doesn't, you know, marry within the same ethnicity? You know, how do I feel about that? Or, you know, what if they don't, you know, want to go into the family business and they want to be, you know, an art teacher? Okay, well, now I got to figure out, how do I keep this, you know, wealth going? So all these different things, I think that, you know, these conversations need to be had. And like I said, in my mind, this is the dark side of having and building and maintaining generational wealth. It's, you know, how do you get the family on board to do things in a certain way that aren't what everybody else is doing? Because let's face it, not a lot of people want to be, you know, everybody wants to be liked to some degree, right? I don't care what anybody says, even like for your peers, even amongst your like your peer, let's just say amongst your peers, you want to be liked to some degree. So when you think outside of that, you know, it can make for some uncomfortable relationships. But some people are prepared for that. You know, I know me personally, I'm prepared for that. I don't really, I don't, I don't do a lot of things a lot of people do anyway. So it's just the way I was raised, the way the family was raised to, you know, step outside the box and really set yourself apart. But, you know, the masses don't think like that. I don't think like that. Maybe they do. But so, you know, like I talked about, different ethnicities have different standards and whatnot. And that's one of the biggest reasons why, you know, generational wealth gets diluted, is because the kids aren't equipped to manage the money or the assets that they inherit, and not just manage them physically, but emotionally, you know, mentally, and, you know, just, you know, from a family dynamic, the principles that they want to implement for their family. So, you know, I think that this topic needs to really be talked about amongst the community of people who are looking to build generational wealth. I hope these conversations are being had with those individuals and their families, because, you know, it'd be a shame for you to build up the assets and whatnot and the resources, whatnot, just to only last a couple generations. You know, you want to, when I think about generational wealth, I think about hundreds of years down the line. You know, having those resources be extended, having those resources be extended down the road for at least 100 years, So 4 generations. You know, um, and walking down the path of generational wealth isn't for everybody. It's not you know it's not all roses and sunshine. There's a lot of work that's involved with that, a lot of sacrifice. And that's another thing you have to ask yourself. Okay, are your kids equipped, is your family equipped to sacrificing for the collective mentally? You know, and I think in this day and age, many people have a individualistic mindset, meaning it's all about them or what they want. And when it comes to the family, it's like, well, the family's on the back burner. But if you're building generational wealth, the family has to be first. Okay, that's how it goes. It's just how it is. It's been done like that for hundreds and hundreds of years. Wealth is in families. That's why I read down that list. Those are families that have that type of money. Okay, the family name has that type of resources. So when your family name is, when you're, deceased and in the next life, and what what's going to be associated with your family name in terms of generational wealth? Will you have that? Will those resources be maintained through your kids? And if they're not displaying those attributes now that can, give you some type of assurance that they will be able to maintain those, then what do you do? So, these are conversations that I think people need to have with themselves and really plan out, okay, what do I need to do? What conversations do I need to have with my kids to really hit home the importance of why I'm doing this and why they should, why they should move or keep things within the same ethnicity. And I think that's like the biggest thing too. That's probably like one of the most important things one of the most important decisions you'll make in life is the person you marry. Okay, the person you marry will make or break that lineage, that future. Okay, and that's why many people in these wealthy families have these conversations around, hey, look, you need to marry within a certain ethnicity, within a certain age bracket, because we want the best of the best. In their mind, they consider their ethnicity the best of the best. When, in terms of continuing that legacy of wealth. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe another ethnicity has somebody who, well, I don't know, maybe, but every ethnicity has great minds and things of that nature. The problem is, like I mentioned before, it's easier for me to tell you to do something or to instill in you a principle if we look the same. Because if we look the same, then, you can identify with me. We go through the same struggles socially. Or we go through, not struggles, but we go through the same events and occurrences socially, because this is how the makeup is. So, last but not least, like I said, having that amount of wealth, comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of power. And a lot of these families use their resources to protect their assets. And part of protecting their assets is monitoring what the family does. If the family does something that doesn't progress the family as a whole forward, then hey, you are more of an outcast than anything in that family. And you're treated as such. Just like, take for instance the Meghan and Harry story. He's treated like an outcast at this point. From what I can overheard, there's a rift between him and his brother. Like I said before, I can only imagine what the Queen of England said. So, I'm pretty sure she wasn't happy with it. But, to save face, she's like, hey, I think she's like, hey, I support my son, whatever the case is. But she's not happy with that. She's not. But these are the conversations that need to be had. Could you cast your son or daughter out of the family if they didn't marry somebody that was in the same ethnicity? If they didn't adhere to certain principles that you wanted for the family to keep the family going? Because these principles help build consistency for years to come. It's like the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, if we got generational wealth and we've kept the wealth in the family because we've married inside of, our own ethnicity, and people have had, these particular character traits that we deem are good or, well for the family. If you go outside of that, now you've broken that link in the chain of ensuring that those assets are continued to be, maintained and even grown down the road. And many times, these kids and things like that are cut off. Could you cut your son or daughter off if they married outside of your ethnicity? Could you do it? I don't think many people could, because at that point it becomes a very hard decision to make, to cut off your own bloodline, okay, your own flesh and blood, in order to maintain the family, structure that's been here for hundreds of years, the power and, the influence and the responsibilities that they have as a family. Could you do that? And I think many people couldn't. But that's just my personal opinion. So, because those, like I said, those are some hard conversations. Even conversations that I had with my dad about that, marrying, black and, staying inside the race and whatnot, inside the ethnicity, those are values that I hold, that I believe in, because of what's been, that's just the responsibility that comes with keeping the assets and things like that in the African American ethnic race. I know it's the ethnic race, but in the African American ethnicity, keeping the things that my father and my grandfather and my grandfather's father built up, keeping those things in, keeping those things in the ethnicity. That's what I believe in. It's afforded me to do some of the things that I've done. Like I said, I've had a very blessed life, but that's the sacrifice I'm willing to make to keep the family going. Could there be somebody outside of my race to marry? Yeah, of course it could. We're all humans. However, you know what? I have no problem finding somebody within my own ethnicity. And for some people, they don't want to believe in that. But see, these are the things that you have to instill into your kids when they're younger. because as they age, it's harder to instill into them certain ideas and principles. But like I said before, this is the dark side of having generational wealth. These conversations, these are some hard conversations. I keep saying that, but it was a hard conversation for me to have with my father when we talked about it. So, but that's all I got for now. I'm really passionate about this particular topic and subject, and I may do another video discussing this as well, kind of maybe going into some, how to maybe have some of these conversations. But this video is really just to get people to thinking about, what, I haven't had these conversations with my kids. I am building, successful real estate empire, or, a successful, financial services business. Maybe I do need to have these conversations with my kids, because I want my work to be, continued on down the road, because I'm doing this for them, so they can have, a much more sustainable life and don't have to, get it out the mud, so to speak, like I had to really set that foundation. Because nobody wants to have their work squandered, in a sense. So, like I said, this is more so to just help people get the conversation going around, like I said, the dark side of generational wealth, in terms of having those conversations about who to marry, how to, put the family first, things like that. So, and I think it's more so who to marry, because that's a very touchy topic in terms of who to marry. So, until next time, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with friends of yours, people who are building generational wealth. Share it with them. Have the conversations with them. If you have a partner, somebody that you're, involved with relationally, ask them, what do they think about that? About, only marrying within the race or the, ethnicity, sacrificing, certain areas of their lives to continue keeping, the family wealth headed in said direction or industry. Do they want to run the business? Do they want to get into real estate? Maybe they don't want to get into real estate if you've got a real estate portfolio. Okay, well, how do they keep the wealth that you generated going? Do they have a plan for it? Maybe they don't want to do that. These are all conversations that you need to have with your kids and your family. So that's it. That's all I got. And I hope everyone takes care. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.